In the early morning hours of August 7th, 1942, darkness still clung to the waters around Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. The first American Marines from the 1st Division waded ashore at Beach Red, their weapons marking a turning point that no Japanese military strategist had anticipated. Mixed among the standard rifles and bar weapons, certain Marines carried Winchester Model 12 shotguns, pump-action firearms capable of unleashing a rate of fire that would fundamentally reshape combat across the Pacific. As the pre-dawn darkness began to lift, these Marines pushed deeper inland from their landing zones, moving toward the first Japanese defensive positions near what they called the Longa River. What unfolded in those opening encounters would reveal a catastrophic failure in Japanese tactical planning. The Imperial Army had organized its entire defensive strategy around rifle engagements at distance, around bayonet charges and close-quarters swordwork. They had trained extensively for these kinds of fights, but they had never prepared for American Marines equipped with shotguns. Weapons capable of firing as rapidly as a soldier could work the pump action, a mechanical reality that would shatter their assumptions battlefield after battlefield across the entire Pacific theater. The approximately 2,200 Japanese defenders already positioned on Guadalcanal were about to confront something they'd never encountered before. American Marines had brought to the Pacific a weapon so devastatingly effective in close combat that Germany had actually attempted to have it banned from warfare back in 1918. The Winchester Model 12, with its ability to slam fire multiple shells in rapid succession, would prove particularly lethal in the dense jungle warfare, in cave fighting, and during the night combat that would come to define the Pacific Campaign. The mathematics of it were stunning. Each shell held 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot. A skilled Marine could fire 6 shells in under 3 seconds using the slam fire technique. In those 3 seconds alone, 54 projectiles would saturate a target area, far more than a Japanese soldier could manage in an entire minute with his bolt-action rifle. The Winchester Model 12 hadn't arrived in World War II as an untested weapon. It carried a reputation forged in the trenches of France. During the First World War, American forces had employed earlier shotgun models with such devastating effectiveness that on September 15, 1918, the German government filed a formal diplomatic protest through Swiss channels. That protest, preserved in United States State Department archives, claimed that shotguns violated Article 23E of the Hague Convention by inflicting unnecessary suffering. The German government stated explicitly that any American prisoner found carrying such weapons would forfeit his life under the laws of war. Secretary of State Robert Lansing's response was direct and unambiguous. The United States rejected the protest entirely and warned that executing American soldiers for carrying shotguns would trigger swift reprisals. No American servicemen were ever executed for this reason, and the weapons continued to be used throughout the war. The Model 12, originally introduced in 1912 as a civilian hunting weapon, had evolved considerably by the time 1942 arrived. The military version, designated the M12 trench gun, featured a shortened 20-inch cylinder bore barrel compared to the 26 to 30 inches on civilian models. It carried a perforated metal heat shield and a bayonet lug. Most importantly, it retained the original design's lack of a trigger disconnector, a mechanical feature that enabled slam firing. This wasn't accidental. Winchester engineers had deliberately designed the Model 12 so that holding down the trigger while working the pump action would fire the weapon as rapidly as the operator could cycle it. Civilian shooters rarely used this capability, but military trainers immediately recognized its combat potential. The Imperial Japanese Army had constructed its entire Pacific defensive strategy on several core assumptions detailed throughout their field manuals. Japanese doctrine placed primary emphasis on 2 tactical advantages: night fighting and close combat. They distinguished between different types of night attacks: Kishu, meaning night surprise attack, and Kyoshu, night force attack. Their infantry training devoted countless hours to moving through darkness, to silent infiltration techniques, to operations that neutralized American advantages in firepower and technology. The underlying conviction was simple but powerful. In combat at bayonet range, the superior spirit and training of Japanese soldiers would prevail over American mechanical superiority. This wasn't merely propaganda speaking. It was fundamental to how Japanese officers planned their defensive operations. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 had seemed to validate these assumptions. Japanese forces had overwhelmed British positions through aggressive night attacks and close combat, defeating a numerically superior force. Similar successes in the Philippines had reinforced the conviction that Americans, like other Western forces, couldn't match Japanese soldiers in close-quarters battle. When American forces invaded Guadalcanal on August 7, 1942, it marked the first major offensive operation against Japanese positions. Among the equipment distributed to Marine units were Winchester Model 12 shotguns, allocated primarily to personnel assigned to jungle patrol, point defense, and security duties. The exact number of Model 12s that reached Guadalcanal remains unclear from historical records, but documentation confirms their presence and active use. The 1st Marine Division's equipment manifests clearly included riot-type shotguns assigned to infantry battalions, backed by ammunition supplies of both buckshot and slug rounds. The first significant test came during the battle at the Tinaru, actually the Ilu River, on August 21, 1942. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki led 916 men of his detachment in a night assault across the sandbar at the river's mouth. Exactly the type of close combat night attack that Japanese doctrine prescribed and expected would succeed. The outcome was catastrophic for Japanese forces. Of the 916 attackers, approximately 800 were killed. While Marine machine guns and artillery accounted for many casualties, the close-range fighting that occurred saw shotguns employed in their intended role. After-action reports noted the effectiveness of all available weapons in repelling the assault, with specific mention of the value of increased firepower at close range. The Model 12's effectiveness stemmed from specific technical characteristics. According to United States Army Ordnance testing data, the military load of double-aught buckshot contained 9.33 caliber lead pellets. At 20 yards, these pellets maintained sufficient velocity to penetrate 3/4 of an inch of pine board, the standard material used to approximate human tissue penetration. The spread pattern proved equally important. At combat ranges of 20 to 30 yards, buckshot spread to approximately 30 inches, creating pattern density that made precise aiming almost unnecessary. This characteristic proved absolutely crucial in jungle warfare, where targets were often fleeting glimpses through dense vegetation. The slam-fire capability multiplied these advantages exponentially. While precise rate of fire measurements from World War II don't exist, post-war testing demonstrated that experienced operators could fire 5 to 6 rounds in under 3 seconds, using the slam-fire technique. This rate of fire exceeded many automatic weapons at close range, with the added advantage of the spreading pattern that didn't require accuracy. Marines developed specific techniques for employing the Model 12 as combat experience accumulated. Training emphasized firing at ground level when defending against crawling infiltrators, exploiting the ricochet effect of buckshot on hard ground. In jungle settings, Marines learned to fire at sound and movement rather than waiting for clear targets, relying on the spread pattern to compensate for imprecise aiming. As Marine units gained experience through 1942 and into 1943, their employment of shotguns became increasingly sophisticated. The weapons proved particularly valuable in specific tactical situations that repeated throughout Pacific combat. During the New Georgia campaign from June through August 1943, shotguns were increasingly assigned to point men on jungle patrols. The ability to deliver immediate devastating firepower in response to ambush proved invaluable. A Marine walking point could react to movement or sound with instant suppressive fire, eventually hitting multiple enemies with a single shot. Night defensive positions incorporated shotguns as a primary weapon against infiltration attempts. Japanese tactics often involve small groups attempting to penetrate Marine lines in darkness, relying on stealth and blade weapons. Marines with shotguns could cover sectors with overlapping fields of fire, creating zones where infiltration became virtually impossible. The weapons also proved effective in what Marines called jungle lane shooting, clearing paths through dense vegetation where Japanese soldiers might hide. The spread pattern would strike multiple obstacles, potentially hitting concealed enemies while simultaneously stripping away foliage that provided concealment. The campaign for the Central Pacific Islands introduced a different tactical challenge entirely. Japanese cave fortifications began to dominate the landscape, beginning with Tarawa in November 1943 and escalating through subsequent operations. Japanese forces increasingly relied on fortified caves and bunkers rather than traditional defensive lines. At Peleliu in September 1944, Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had prepared an elaborate cave defense system. The island's coral ridges were honeycombed with natural caves that Japanese engineers had expanded and reinforced. These positions, designed to withstand naval bombardment and aerial attack, required intimate close-range combat to clear. The Model 12 proved adaptable to this new challenge. Marines developed techniques for cave clearing that exploited the shotgun's characteristics. The standard approach involved firing 1 or 2 shells into a cave entrance, allowing the buckshot to ricochet off interior walls. The ricocheting pellets created what Marines described as a lead storm inside confined spaces. The psychological effect often exceeded the physical damage. Japanese soldiers who survived reported that the sound of ricocheting buckshot in caves was uniquely terrifying. A metallic shrieking that seemed to come from all directions simultaneously. The invasion of Saipan on June 15, 1944, saw shotgun tactics continue to evolve. The Japanese garrison of 31,000 troops under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito had prepared extensive fortifications, learning from previous American assaults. Marine units had developed what they called shotgun teams, specialized groups tasked with close-range assault. This typically consisted of 2 shotgun-armed Marines, 1 Bargana for suppressive fire, and 1 or 2 riflemen with grenades. The teams operated as specialized assault elements, particularly effective against fortified positions. The battle for Saipan also saw increased use of specialized ammunition. While double-aught buckshot remained standard, Marines also employed solid slug rounds for longer-range precision fire and smaller birdshot loads for stripping vegetation to expose hidden positions. On July 7, 1944, Saipan witnessed the largest Japanese Banzai charge of the entire war, approximately 3,000 to 4,000 attackers assaulting American positions. While machine guns and artillery inflicted most casualties, the close-range fighting that penetrated American lines saw extensive use of all available weapons, including shotguns. The ability to deliver multiple projectiles without precise aiming proved valuable in the confused melee of night combat. The battle for Iwo Jima, spanning February 19 through March 26, 1945, presented the ultimate test of cave warfare tactics. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had created the most sophisticated defensive system of the entire war. 11 miles of tunnels connecting over 1,500 caves, pillboxes, and fortified positions. Kuribayashi had studied American tactics from previous battles and designed his defenses specifically to counter them. Cave entrances were angled to prevent direct fire. Multiple exits prevented entrapment. Interior chambers were offset to limit the effect of explosives and flamethrowers. Despite these preparations, Model 12 shotguns remained effective. Marines adapted by developing skip shooting, deliberately banking buckshot off tunnel walls to reach around corners. They also increased their use of white phosphorus shells, which created both casualties and smoke that forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions. The 21,000 Japanese defenders were gradually eliminated in brutal close-range fighting. Of these, only 216 were taken prisoner, most wounded or unconscious when captured. The nature of fighting at Iwo Jima, with its emphasis on eliminating fortified positions at close range, highlighted the continued relevance of weapons like the Model 12. Despite the overall mechanization of warfare, the invasion of Okinawa on April 1, 1945, represented the largest amphibious operation of the Pacific War. General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded 100,000 Japanese troops in the most extensive defensive network yet constructed. Colonel Hiromichi Yajara, Ushijima's operations officer and one of Japan's most brilliant staff officers, had designed the defense to maximize American casualties. By Okinawa, both sides had learned from 3 years of Pacific combat. Japanese forces no longer wasted themselves in banzai charges, but fought from prepared positions. American forces had refined their combined arms tactics, with shotguns playing a specific role in the close combat phases of cave and bunker reduction. The 82-day campaign saw the full evolution of American cave-clearing techniques. Marines and Army troops employed what they called blowtorch and corkscrew tactics. Flamethrowers provided the blowtorch, while demolitions and close-range weapons like shotguns served as the corkscrew to penetrate positions. The actual production and distribution of Model 12 shotguns tells a different story from popular perception. According to Winchester Company records analyzed by historian Herbert G. House, only 61,014 Model 12 shotguns were manufactured during World War II. An additional 19,207 were repaired or refurbished by Winchester, leading to confusion about total numbers. These weapons were distributed across all service branches: Marines, Army, Navy, and Army Air Forces, not exclusively to Marine units. The Army Air Forces, for instance, used Model 12s for air-based defense and aircraft guard duties. The Navy employed them for ship security and landing party operations. This relatively limited production, just 61,014 new weapons for a military of 12 million, meant that Model 12s were specialized weapons rather than general issue. They were concentrated in units expected to face close combat: Marine rifle companies, Army assault teams, and security detachments. The ammunition supply was more abundant. Military contracts for shotgun shells ran into the millions, ensuring that units equipped with shotguns had adequate ammunition for both training and combat. The standard military load was double-aught buckshot, with slug rounds and smaller shot sizes available for specific purposes. Evaluating the Model 12's actual combat effectiveness requires careful analysis of available evidence. After-action reports from Pacific battles consistently note the value of shotguns in specific situations while acknowledging their limitations. The weapons excelled in several scenarios, consistently reported across different battles: jungle ambush response, the ability to deliver immediate devastating firepower in response to sudden contact at close range, with the spread pattern compensating for difficulty acquiring targets in dense vegetation. Light defense provided effective protection against infiltration attempts. The sound of a pump action being cycled became a psychological deterrent, while the spread pattern increased hit probability in darkness. Cave and bunker clearing benefited from the ricochet effect in confined spaces, which multiplied the weapon's effectiveness. Even when direct hits weren't achieved, the psychological impact of buckshot ricocheting in enclosed spaces often forced Japanese soldiers to evacuate positions. During final assault phases, when combat closed to ranges under 25 yards, shotguns provided superior firepower to bolt-action rifles and even some automatic weapons. However, the weapons had clear limitations. The effective range of 50 yards or less meant shotgun-armed troops were vulnerable to rifle fire at longer ranges. The ammunition was bulky and heavy compared to rifle rounds. The weapons required frequent cleaning in the corrosive salt environment of the Pacific. Japanese forces attempted various countermeasures to American close combat weapons, including shotguns. These adaptations, documented in captured Japanese materials and post-war interrogations, reveal both the perceived threat and the difficulty of countering it. Some Japanese units experimented with body armor, including thick wooden or bamboo plates designed to stop buckshot. These proved cumbersome and only partially effective, as buckshot could still cause disabling injuries to exposed areas. Tactical adaptations included increasing the depth of defensive positions to prevent infiltration by assault teams, creating false positions to absorb initial attacks, and using obstacles to maintain engagement distances beyond shotgun range. Despite these efforts, Japanese forces never developed fully effective counters to American close combat tactics. The fundamental problem was material. Japan lacked the industrial capacity to match American firepower at any range, forcing continued reliance on tactics that brought them into the very close-range fights where weapons like the Model 12 excelled. The German protest of 1918 regarding shotgun use created a legal precedent that influenced World War II employment. The American rejection of German protests established that shotguns were legitimate weapons of war under international law. Interestingly, despite the Model 12's effectiveness against Japanese forces, Japan never filed a similar protest. This absence may reflect several factors related to Japan's position in the international community and its strategic calculations during the war. Japan's own violations of international law during its invasion of China made formal complaints about weapons difficult to justify. With diplomatic channels already collapsing and Japan facing military defeat by mid-war, protesting American shotguns became an irrelevant concern. Meanwhile, the legal status of shotguns stood in stark contrast to weapons that other nations had forbidden. Gas, prohibited since the Great War ended, never appeared in the Pacific fighting, despite potential advantages for clearing hidden enemy positions. The shotgun, with its devastating close-range destructiveness, remained within the accepted rules of combat. American Marines developed comprehensive training methods based directly on what they learned in actual fighting. The sniper school at Camp Lejeune included shotgun instruction, though specific details of wartime curricula have been lost to history. Training focused on several fundamental lessons drawn from real combat experience. First came ammunition management. Shotgun shells presented a significant problem compared to rifle rounds. They consumed far more space and weighed considerably more. Marines learned to secure shells in elastic loops attached to belts and bandoliers, allowing quick access during action. A typical load ran between 50 and 60 shells, and resupply remained an ongoing challenge. Next came shooting positions. The pump mechanism demanded different body positioning than traditional rifle technique. Marines trained extensively in firing from the hip while moving, snap shooting without relying on sights, and maintaining stability while cycling the action repeatedly. Then came target selection. Shotgun crews learned to prioritize the nearest threats and sweep their fire across multiple opponents rather than concentrating on single individuals. Since the pellets spread across an area, precise aiming mattered far less than rapid engagement. Finally came weapon maintenance. The Pacific's harsh environment proved brutal to firearms. Salt air, sand, and constant moisture could render a Model 12 useless within days. Daily cleaning became non-negotiable, particularly keeping the action properly lubricated and debris-free. American experimentation with shotguns during the war stood apart from other major powers. Their weapons choices revealed fundamentally different strategic thinking. Britain relied primarily on the Stengun submachine gun for close-quarters work and used shotguns mainly for prisoner escort duties and specialized assignments. The Soviet Union produced over 6 million PPSH-41 submachine guns, embracing high-volume firepower and large magazine capacity to support their mass assault doctrine. Germany protested shotgun use after the First World War, yet ironically produced limited quantities for fighting on the Eastern Front, though the MP-40 remained their preferred close combat weapon. Japan manufactured virtually no combat shotguns at all, instead maintaining emphasis on rifles, bayonets, and traditional melee weapons, a choice reflecting both industrial constraints and cultural tradition. American commanders adopted shotguns through pure pragmatism, selecting whatever proved most effective regardless of conventional military thinking. Understanding the Model 12's actual impact requires viewing it within the larger framework of Pacific warfare tactics. The weapon functioned as one component within a sophisticated integrated approach, combining naval bombardment, aircraft strikes, artillery fire, machine gun teams, flamethrowers, and engineering demolitions. By 1945, reducing a Japanese fortified position followed a predictable sequence. First, naval guns and bombers suppressed and isolated the target. Second, artillery and mortars cut off reinforcements, while machine guns and Browning automatic rifles suppressed enemy fire. Third, assault teams moved forward with flamethrower operators and demolition crews. Fourth, shotgun-armed soldiers cleared final strongpoints. Finally, engineers sealed or destroyed remaining structures. Shotguns delivered their firepower precisely when American and Japanese soldiers met at arm's length, feet rather than yards separating them. Psychological factors often prove more powerful than physical capability. The Model 12 influenced both sides' morale, though separating genuine effects from propaganda demands careful examination. American forces gained confidence, knowing they wielded overwhelming firepower in close quarters. The knowledge of devastating capabilities reduced fear about infiltration attacks and suicide charges. The mechanical dependability of the Model 12 strengthened this confidence further. The weapon rarely malfunctioned and demanded minimal training to operate under extreme stress. Even the sound itself became important. Veterans consistently reported that the distinctive rack-rack of the pump action reassured American troops while potentially unnerving Japanese forces. Though hard to measure precisely, this psychological dimension appears repeatedly throughout veteran testimony. Following Japan's capitulation, military analysts systematically reviewed weapons performance throughout the Pacific Campaign. Shotguns received complex assessments. Troops credited them with remarkable success in particular scenarios, especially clearing caves and defending positions at night. The ability to project multiple pellets without precise aiming proved extremely valuable during the chaotic, close-range battles typical of island fighting. Yet limitations emerged clearly. Open terrain left shotgun users exposed and vulnerable. Small firing ports in Japanese bunkers reduced effectiveness substantially. Supplying specialized ammunition created logistical complications. Despite these drawbacks, shotguns remained in the American inventory. The Model 12 saw extensive service again in Korea and appeared in Vietnam for point men and tunnel operations, demonstrating the lasting applicability of Pacific lessons. The Model 12's mechanical arrangement shaped future military shotgun designs. The pump-action mechanism proved more dependable under actual combat conditions than semi-automatic alternatives. The slam-fire function, eventually removed from civilian versions for safety, remained militarily valuable. Reconstructing the Model 12's actual combat history requires drawing from multiple incomplete sources. Official after-action reports provide tactical summaries but seldom mention specific weapons. Unit equipment rosters document which guns were distributed without revealing combat employment. Many such records vanished during the fighting. Technical manuals explain operation and general use, but not actual battlefield applications. Veteran narratives and oral histories offer first-hand accounts that must be carefully assessed for reliability and typical experience. Japanese sources, including captured materials and post-war interviews, present the opponent's perspective but suffer from translation difficulties and massive record loss. Combat photographs occasionally capture Marines holding shotguns without proving their effectiveness. This scattered evidence demands rigorous analysis to distinguish established fact from mythology and speculation. The Model 12's use revealed the enormous industrial and technological advantage America possessed. American industry could produce 614,000 shotguns despite limited military application, while simultaneously manufacturing millions of rifles, hundreds of thousands of machine guns, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces. This simultaneous production demonstrated overwhelming material dominance. Japan faced the opposite situation, struggling to equip forces with basic rifles and ammunition. Manufacturing quality of the Type 99 rifle declined steadily as the war continued. By 1945, Japanese soldiers carried bamboo spears alongside firearms, graphically illustrating industrial collapse. This disparity extended throughout ammunition supplies. American forces used fresh ammunition freely, discarding any shells showing corrosion or deterioration. Japanese troops rationed every cartridge and frequently relied on captured munitions. American tactical development in the Pacific reflected organizational flexibility rather than rigid hierarchical control. Officers encouraged innovation among junior ranks rather than imposing doctrinal decisions from above. Marines sharing effective techniques spread knowledge informally across units. Successful practices became incorporated into formal training and doctrine through this grassroots process. The skip shooting technique exemplifies this bottom-up innovation. Marines independently discovered in multiple units that buckshot ricocheted predictably off cave walls, enabling them to shoot around corners. Born from necessity and repeated experimentation, this technique eventually became standard procedure. Similarly, mixed ammunition loads alternating buckshot and slugs emerged from combat experience rather than pre-war planning. Marines found this combination offered flexibility for varying targets without requiring weapon changes. However, tactical implements like the Model 12, while contributing meaningfully, did not determine the Pacific War's ultimate outcome. American submarines systematically starved Japanese logistics. Strategic bombing devastated Japanese industrial capacity. Naval superiority prevented resupply of isolated garrisons. Atomic weapons eliminated the need for invasion. These strategic elements established the overall framework. Within that context, tactical weapons accelerated Japanese position reduction, preserved American lives, maintained offensive momentum, and demonstrated continued resistance futility. Improved cave-clearing efficiency meant fewer casualties and faster progress toward critical objectives like airfields and ports. The Model 12's use teaches broader lessons about military innovation and adapting proven technology to emerging problems. When World War II began, the Model 12 represented 3 decades of existing design. Innovation came through application rather than invention. Effective tactics emerged from soldier-level experimentation rather than official doctrine development. The gun succeeded in specific situations but possessed clear limitations. Armed forces must balance specialized tools with general-purpose capabilities. Weapon potential remained unrealized without adequate training. Technology itself provided limited advantage without supporting doctrine and instruction. Maintaining specialized weapons demands robust industrial foundation. Tactical advancement requires logistical infrastructure. Beyond technical considerations existed actual human beings. American soldiers carrying these weapons and Japanese defenders confronting them. Their filtered memories and experiences remain essential to understanding. Marines frequently chose shotguns voluntarily, accepting reduced range for overwhelming close-quarters capability. This personal decision reflected individual tactical judgment and individual preference. Some swore by the shotgun's devastating effect. Others preferred rifle versatility. Operating the weapon under combat stress-tested human capabilities extensively. Slam firing required strength and coordination while frightened, exhausted, or wounded. Yet Marines performed these functions effectively repeatedly in genuine combat. The Winchester Model 12 service in the Pacific War demonstrated both American adaptability and industrial strength. The weapon performed exceptionally well in particular tactical situations, including cave clearing, nocturnal defense, jungle ambush reactions, and final assault phases. Its slam-fire ability produced devastating close-range firepower that Japanese forces lacked effective countermeasures against. Yet this impact requires proper perspective. Only 614,000 were produced during the entire war, making it a specialized tool rather than standard infantry equipment. Its success depended on integration within larger combined arms systems. Strategic factors far broader than tactical weapons determined the war's outcome. Japanese military leadership's failure to anticipate or effectively respond to American shotgun employment reflected wider strategic misjudgments regarding American capabilities. Japanese doctrine overemphasized spiritual factors and individual warrior excellence while catastrophically underestimating American material abundance and tactical adaptability. The Model 12, mechanically uncomplicated yet devastatingly effective, embodied this pragmatic American approach. From the steaming jungles of Guadalcanal through the limestone caves of Okinawa, the distinctive sound of pump-action cycling represented American willingness to innovate tactically. Marines equipped with Model 12s proved industrial democracies could develop and deploy specialized weapons for specific tactical requirements. This weapon that Germany once condemned as inhumane became merely another pragmatic tool in America's expanding arsenal. The Model 12's influence extended far beyond 1945. Pacific tactics shaped American doctrine for Korea, Vietnam, and ongoing contemporary operations. The focus on close-range firepower, specialized weapons for particular problems, and innovation driven by combat users remains strategically relevant today. Japanese defenders never anticipated Winchester trench guns would slam fire through their defensive lines because such weapons contradicted their fundamental warfare assumptions. The Model 12 communicated a straightforward message. American forces would deploy overwhelming firepower at every distance, utilize any effective technology, and continuously adapt through innovation. Within the brutal Pacific calculus, the Model 12 contributed decisively to American victory. This transformation occurred not through the weapon alone, but through what it symbolized. America embraced whatever proved effective, developed innovative tactics relentlessly, and applied industrial capability to tactical challenges systematically. Japanese soldiers encountering these weapons learned their opponents had conquered not merely the art of war, but the disciplined science of systematically concentrating firepower, destroying any defensive structure, surmounting any obstacle, and achieving victory through combined material superiority and continuous tactical innovation.